Hello, everybody. Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Okay, so I finished this game about 3 minutes ago. I played very accurately. My opponent played accurately. I went for 34 moves. Let's see what happened. Queen's pawn opening. Queen's gambit. Wait, is this really more gravity? That is more gravity. King's pawn. It's sort of a less common way to play here for white. E3 is the main line. Queen's gambit accepted. To open up an attack against the black's extra pawn, or now extra pawn, but it puts the e3 pawn in the way of white's dark squared bishop. So sometimes you can sort of like go for the gusto here and play e4, and it's actually one of those things where just one square makes a lot of difference in the type of game that evolves. In my experience, I haven't played much of pawn e3 here in this position, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But in what I know, this is a more open game, and my opponent chose to play pawn to e5. I'm going to capture here because after queen takes d1, king takes d1, material's even. White is threatening, not black. Has good control of the center because of where his pawns are. However, they are doubled pawns. Turns out not to be such a bad thing. The f pawn might allow for an en passant capture or a regular capture on f6. That white has an attack on c4 to which black should respond. The king has moved out of his starting spot. Normally that's bad. I mean, a lot of these are doubled pawns, and the other side has and doesn't quite have the lead in material, but could. Doubled pawns, and the king's already moved and on move 5 and everything. It's not so bad. The king's moved to recapture a queen, so the overall attacking versus developing nature of the chess position swings a lot towards developing. There's no queens on the board, right? That's it. I think that's it. That's it. But I think this sort of justifies that I played d takes e5 with an air of curiosity, not miscalculation. So yeah, my opponent, you see that your opponent has strayed from book, and maybe my opponent wants to just attack. I don't think that bishop b4 was a good move. I'm critical of this move because it's so easily refuted by bishop to d2. If the pawn moves forward, we've got enough pieces on c3. Yeah, and a trade of bishops on d2 just develops white's b1 knight to d2. It's just it's not. This is not a good move. I'm critical of this move. Bishop to d2, right? Like I said, we're aiming for the trade, and if pawn to c3 comes, that's also good. You capture with the bishop or the knight, even with the b2 pawn, though I think probably with the knight would be best there to develop a piece, capture a pawn, protect some stuff. Not exactly sure. I could calculate it after a while. Perhaps with the bishop, because then he's controlling this more awkwardly placed e5 pawn. But white's doing well in that event. This capture of this exchange of bishops on d2. And also the other part of it is after knight takes d2. Without the exchange of bishops, this pawn is defensible for black in a couple ways. But now that there's two pieces against the pawn, I'm not really sure that b5 holds it all together. Right? If we're going to play black here and play what I think is the best move, b5, though noting bishop to e6. But let's say with b5, I think white can strike at the base a little bit here. If there's captures, then one more piece is on c4, and if protecting with a6, then pawn takes b6, pawn takes b6, and then all of a sudden rook takes a8, and black has lost massive material. So this pawn, I think, is best for black to just let it go, let him. He's done. Away. It'll cost white a move to spend to capture the dang thing, and that's what black does. It's a pretty mature development of knight to c6. Also, I played knight to c4 to protect the pawn on e5, and even that's not rock solid either. So maybe I might have come up with a better plan here for white. Even just letting the pawn go with bishop takes c4, or knight to f3, protecting that pawn, and like we said, this pawn's going to be a goner. But instead I chose knight takes c4. This is interesting. This is a queenless middle game with a lot of interesting properties. My king has moves on the d5. I don't always see that. My opponent's king hasn't moved. He'll have most likely the opportunity to castle at some point in the future. There's these doubled pawns in the center on the e file here are a little bit wacky, a little bit to mean strange. I've got a knight aggressively posted on c4, where he can pretty much just be bullied away by b5 at once. It's the kind of, in the way that queenless middle games go, this is interesting and dynamic. There are different factors. I will agree with Torch that white has here a very slight edge, a very small edge. Bishop to e6. We're going to my opponent's threatening to remove the defender, so I'm adding another defender, and white becomes stronger in this weird sort of pawn, not even chain, this pawn cluster here. It's a strange one. King to c2. I thought this to be the most practical way for white to avoid an attack on mostly in the center. So just king to c2 and not much else. Some slight loss there in best move, too good move, and that's okay. Then king to c3 is smart here. If I was low on time, or when I was less experienced, I might have said, heck, there's nothing wrong with king to b3. But there is pinning my own knight. And it's just not as good a move. With king to c3, the nuance is now I'm in pretty much the same position for a lot of other things. The knight is not pinned. A move like a move like pawn to b5 cannot claim the knight for a pawn. It's just king to c3 is slightly better. I was calculating against king to b3 as well as king to c3. I determined that king to c3 was better to avoid the pin on white's knight at c4. So when we have their king to c3 and some of these things have settled here, it's time to develop. White needs to get his pieces into the game. First, but the funny thing is this might be actually stronger than developing straight away. And the knight on d6 is a monster. against which black must face. Then moving pawn to f5. There's probably some towards some sort of way that this is against white's best interests. I think maybe if black dumps the bishop, not even dumps the bishop, but plays bishop to a2 or knight to a2. So yeah, my opponent and I both missed a serious response to we both missed this. Really, knight takes a2 is going to make things difficult for white here. Anyway, my opponent missed it, I missed it, and as a competitor, I'm glad for that. Because it allowed me to play knight takes f7, forking these two rooks. Knight e7 allows, once a rook has been captured, for my knight to be subsequently captured by the other rook. This is a position you'll see yourself in a lot of times. Which rook to capture? Easy. One's going to capture the other, or the other's going to capture the one. So you want to misplace the capturing rook. Knight takes h8, rook takes h8, and now this rook is away from his duties on the d file. Alright, see, the knight takes h8, rook takes h8, and it'll just take black just that one extra tempo, or one extra tempo. Leave white slightly better off than otherwise. Kick the knight back, developing. Late, this is sort of a late thing. Now here, with white to move, I played bishop to b5. I really want to keep things simple. With bishop to b5, I'm going to get a minor piece out of this bishop. There's no way for black to razzle-dazzle, and grab this bishop before I at least have a chance to get the x-ray minor piece on e8. And most likely I'm going to capture on c6. Just get that piece out of there, both of them. I mean, we'd love to hang on to this bishop in the process, but when it comes to it, my friends, this knight, we just want these pieces, equal value pieces, out of there, guys. So, yeah, you'll see as soon as my opponent leaves the e8 square to, do anything else, now I don't have that guarantee on trading pieces. If I let the turn go by with something like rook e1, whatever, then all of a sudden maybe knight to d8. As silly as that seems, but it's not so silly that I no longer have my guarantee minor piece trade. And you say, well, that's the big deal? That it is a big deal. When you're ahead material, you want to trade pieces, and it'll become habit over time as you pursue minor piece trades between knights and bishops, bishops and bishops, knights and knights. So I go for the minor piece trade. This is the equal value trade of pieces on c6. Yeah, and even here, I'm partly bullying my opponent into making a decision about whether or not to trade on f3. You wouldn't normally do that given my opponent being behind in material. But the other location is e8. I mean, you could try f7, but I'm going to push, and then the bishop back to g8. That does not look good. Having black's own rook into place, and with the bishop sort of just hiding poorly so. But bishop to e8, I guess, is a move. I would think maybe bishop to e8. You know what else black could play here is, before that, rook to d8. Then I push g4. Then he's got time to go to e8 while the rook's on the other side of the light squared bishop. That makes a big difference. It's an improvement. But, these pawns, these advancing pawns can look menacing. So I think my opponent just did whack and played bishop takes f3, allowing for for a trade of pieces of equal value. Pawn takes f3. And it's not all that bad either from black's standpoint, because the pawn at e5 now falls. And overall, I guess black picks up, trades 4, overall black captures 4 points of material and gives away 3 points of material. So it's good. So one of the ways to play, one of the advice, so you're not exactly sure what to play, try to improve your weakest piece. Even if it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a superstar right away, like from this position to, rooks tripled on d1, d2, d3, and then a triple of queens on d5, d6, d7 also. And then no, that doesn't happen in one move. So sometimes you want to improve your weakest piece. It could mean simply protecting a key pawn, for instance. In this case, white keeps the black knight at e5 away, and in a way that he is not going to penetrate into white's position. So simply rook to f1 protects white's weakest piece. In this case, a pawn. Sometimes sometimes a pawn is a piece. Sometimes kings and queens are pieces. Normally they're normally not, right? The king's normally the king, and you could consider the rook and the queen to be major pieces, knights and bishops to be minor pieces. Sometimes pawns are pieces, other times pawns are pawns. It depends on the context. So just be aware of that when you're listening to instruction or giving instruction, that it's not 100% defined in one way or the other with that. So okay, so simply rook to f1 here, and f3 is protected. Not a crazy move, not a dazzling move, but a very important move. Suppose I play the other rook to f1. Now what am I doing about the d file? The knight will penetrate on d3 soon enough, because he's backed up by the rook on d8, and it's just there's no need for that. So rook at h to f1, rook h to f1. Rook to d8, and then rook to d8. Rook to d8, and then rook to d1. Looking for a trade of rooks. Looking for a trade of rooks. And d5 is one of these mature, experienced moves that simply mostly prepares the doubling of rooks on the d file with rook f to d1. Also attacking a key piece, attacking another piece. This is just a normal, routine, solid move that demonstrates how I've improved my game in the last 6 years. Rook d7 is a little more nuanced. The idea being, as I start to sense black recoiling here, I want this pawn, I want this pawn. I'm not all that worried, or I'm not against having doubled rooks on the 7th rank either, where there's a checkmating pattern that could evidence itself. Knight to e5. Rook takes g7. I'm doing some of the sure things first, capturing the pawns first, and if black fails to address the weakness to this double rook checkmating motif, then yeah, I'll push for that. Now I can push for it with 5 extra points of material instead of 3. These knight moves are not helping for black. And this is, yeah. What is black even going to do to protect against a forced checkmate? There are no safe checks here for black to levy, and it's just going to be checkmate. So I want to say, I'm going to show it once. Check, check, checkmate. Right? This is one of the most basic, most important, most practical checkmates for a player to learn. It occurs when these 3 pieces on c7, b7, and a7, don't worry too much about them. This rook is important that he's there. So he keeps the king from fleeing towards the center where there would otherwise be some sort of 3-fold repetition draw available most of the time. The idea here is just give a check into the corner, check, and then checkmate. This is a very important mating motif to memorize. You memorize this, look for it while you attack. Memorize this, look for it while you defend. 2 rooks occupying the one rook occupying the outermost edge of the board, another rook next to him delivering checkmate, and the king cannot flee so as to not occupy the same square as his own rook. Very important checkmating pattern. So anyway, I got it, and I thought this game was good. Let's take a look. We had a number of different things. There's this position. Yeah, this is just a good game of chess. Alright. Neither my opponent nor I should hang our heads about this game. We both played a strong game. I'm glad to have won, and so it is. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.